PI3V3 Renaissance Cat. Meow. That's me, yeah. Let's take a look at this video. We're living in an idiocracy, ... by Asmongold TV.
Hi guys, it's me again. Today we're going to talk about something that everybody has experienced, at least secondhand, and some people unknowingly have also experienced this firsthand as well. And that is going to be the decline of critical thought. This is something that I've been observing over the past 15 or 20 years or so.
Do they actually make decisions? You know, like for the foreign policy, for the spending, the budget, you know, like what's up with that?
And I think that it's definitely started gaining momentum recently. And I want to explain and kind of talk about...
I'm thinking we're at the end of a cycle, so to speak, where you cannot keep people drinking the Kool-Aid. And so you go into overdrive trying to promote the most unhinged ideas and playing to the most base instincts of people even more. But that's a sign of this thing being on the way out, right?
Explore why is that really happening. And this is a very popular topic in conversation in pop culture. There are things like Idiocracy. There's the age-old question that people seem to be asking more often recently, which distilled down is something like, why are people so fucking retarded nowadays? And today, we're going to answer that question.
Okay.
And
I would say it's because people, the permanent bureaucracy and so on, they want to make their own decisions. That puts money in their, you know, in their pockets. And that also reaffirms their delusions as to why they are in power. And most people are kind of outside of that decision-making process. And they're being kept there quite intentionally by propagating certain ideas. Like, for one example, the idea that we live in an idiocracy itself is such an idea. Because it means, oh, we can't have people make decisions. They're all so dumb, right? I don't like that line of arguments because it reaffirms this idea. Let's see where Asmongold goes with this.
We think that there's a number of reasons for this that make a lot of sense. And the first thing you have to understand is that you have to understand that people need an identity. And that identity used to be tied to a religion, which, by the way, required you to do the exact same thing that secular ideology requires you to do as well.
And why
but
is
the
that
religion
wrong?
was a little bit more creative about it. And let's be honest, a burning bush is a little bit more exciting than climate change, isn't it? But I can show you guys how there's definitely a correlation there.
But yeah, so identities, yes. Of course, that is one vehicle of getting people disconnected from the critical thinking, from the political process, so to speak, as well, because there is no alternative in that framework, right? It comes with a political prescription. Clearly, like religion too, in a way. Comes with a prescription. You stay in your place and like the king takes care or something. Don't worry about it.
And so anyway, this begins as a kid. And I think that nowadays kids, I mean, I feel bad for a kid nowadays. They're growing.
And yeah, the massaging of the mind starts early. Yup. I mean, why do we have like 14 years of mandatory schooling for a lot of people? Want to be a barista or something? I don't know. I mean,
growing up, they're 2 and 3 years old, they're getting addicted to Cocoa Melon, then they get older, they've got Mr. Beast selling them, you know, chocolate when there's like, oh, well, this is...
There's a lot of dopaminergic interventions that are gonna mess you up, true.
Supposed to be healthy and it's not. They get a little bit older, they start, you know, they turn 8 years old, they can finally write their name, and then by the time they turn 10, they learn about galaxy gas, and then they forget their name again. And so, you think about it as a kid now.
Yeah, sure, there are the harmful physical changes that you can experience, but you can always work against these as well.
Nowadays, and you're really getting spawn camped pretty hard. But anyway, here's another component to it that's very interesting.
I just, you know, I'm gonna steer away from this idea that it's like about stupid people governing.
critical thought, and I think thinking as a concept, and you can think about this with IQ tests. With IQ tests, this, as with any conversation of nature versus nurture, it's often, a lot of times, some from column A, some from column B. It's a little bit of both. You can actually train yourself to become better at IQ tests to an extent.
True.
And I think that also what's happened is that people have trained themselves to not critically think.
True.
And I think that what's happened is that if you have, your brain and you're thinking about things and you're trying to solve things out and reason them out, you train your brain. It's like a muscle, just like any.
Yeah, it really is a learned skill. I learned so much in like sort of letter exchanges on Reddit, like one-on-one conversation that nobody else reads besides you and the other person. And you actually try to find out what the other person says and what you yourself could say to that and how you would say it so you actually say what you want to say. It's like, yeah, that really helped me. That's after I went to college for a while. And yeah, we learned like all kinds of stuff about sources. Like I think I heard this in college. It's like to properly source, you actually have to reproduce the argument of the person you're trying to quote for your thing. Like either with a concise quote of their argument or by you paraphrasing what is the argument of the person you're quoting. Like, this is actually very hard. And just reading the book of the person, their principal work or whatever, it doesn't actually make you do that necessarily.
Other thing, and if you don't use it, you lose it. If you use your brain, you're able to use your brain more. And if you don't use your brain, you're not able to use your brain quite as much. And I think this has happened a lot, where people are effectively mentally AFK. And I think that they go AFK quite early on now in life. Because back whenever we were kids, and by we, I mean all of the other boomers that remember 3,000 years ago in 1990, and we were kids, and we would be told, you won't have a calculator in your pocket. By the way, Miss Williams, you're fucking wrong. Dumb bitch. I knew that she was dumb.
Wow.
And I was right. But anyway, that's not the point.
There's an emphasis on memorization potential. Let's just say if you're extremely busy with your school life, most of your school life, it's probably something about too much memorization. And so, yeah, that would make you go mentally AFK. Because just because you memorized and can reproduce quotes from a text doesn't mean you understand the argument. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. It's not a bad skill to have. It's definitely a good one, but not a very good one. And, just like, if you're very busy with school, maybe you should be less busy and do more thinking. You know what I mean? Like, go out in the woods or whatever. I do think I recall Asmongold be like, yeah, they used to play in the woods and stuff. Like, have an actual exploration. And it can take place on the internet too and whatnot. It's of course the mechanical inputs from being in the physical world are very stimulating, so maybe can go with less Ritalin then. So
the point is that we all learned how to do addition. We all learned how to do multiplication. We learned how to divide fractions. And learning math is learning logic. And learning logic is learning how to critically think.
I wouldn't really go that far. I was pretty darn good at maths, but it did not make me be able to consistently say what I want to say in writing, unless I did like a rewrite or two, Like there's logical shortcuts that are intuitive to take when you use natural language. So, and most of the time it's not a big deal, but so he's kind of making the case a little too hard here.
And now that there are so many tools, calculators, things that you can take a picture of it and it just automatically solves the equation on your math test, there are all these tools that people...
And yeah, so fair enough. It's a mental model, the model of maths, sure, and people have it less now, but I still got to apply it to other things, actually. That translation is expensive mental resource-wise.
People have for them nowadays that effectively take different instances of critical thought that a person would have to do, and now that critical thought no longer has to occur. You no longer have to think about this yourself because the app does it for you. You have computers now, and it's weird.
No, you know what? Just talk about technology also makes me think, why do you even want a competent workforce if you make the decisions and you aren't actually being held to account in much of any way? Now, again, this may be changing now.
because, you know, you're having like this weird, like, you know, historical bell curve where boomers, actual boomers, don't know how to use a computer. And then people that are around, I'd say like 40 to like maybe 25 or so, definitely probably know how to use a computer.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now, this is really scary, is young people are now, again, learning how not to use computers. This is, by the way, another thing that Idiocracy...
Again, see, there's an ebb and a flow, and, well, if people are now still being taught not to use their mental faculties very well, I mean, that's not great for them, but I think they'll catch up in time if it's just gonna be expected of them to perform.
Predicted. And that there would be a bunch of, you know, like, wow, these machines, how do they work? Nobody knows. Well, anyway, nowadays, kids, because these computers are so well designed, they don't really break as often as, you know, Windows 98 used to or Windows XP used to. And you don't have to go into CMD to release and, you know, renew your IP address every single time you get a new router. It just does that for its own. It does that on its own.
True.
It does that for itself. And because of that, people...
You can still make your computer blue screen of death a lot if you play with the voltages in the BIOS. Of course, get into a hobby, commit yourself, you will suddenly become more of an expert at a whole system, at holistic system thinking, when you do overclocking than what you get out of some medical degrees. Because it's all hyper-specialized, or at least a lot of it. Nothing against hyper-specialization, it's very useful too, but also you need the generalists.
Never really learn how to use computers. They don't really understand how the computer works.
And yeah, so there is an understanding of systems, and then there's being extremely intelligent in this like hyper-specialized way. Like, oh yeah, you know how the ear works or something, like one part of the ear.
And I think that the problem with that, and I actually, and here's what's really crazy about that, is that I bet people that are 30 years older than me, 40 years older than me, would be saying this exact same thing about us with cars. Because now, every car, you don't have to open your hood to figure out the way that it works. All you have to do is plug it into a little USB thing or a connector at AutoZone. It gives you an error code, and then you take it to the mechanic, and the mechanic fixes it based off of the error code. Much better system. However, people know a lot less about cars.
True.
And I think the same thing is happening with computers now.
Again, this is, it feels like you just need the hobby. Have more time for free exploration, get a hobby. And if your hobby has something to do with communication with other people, you're gonna be pretty darn good at that, at logical thinking, in time, within the realm of ideas. Which is pretty darn handy, I think.
Because computers are becoming much more defined, tighter, more enclosed systems that don't require as much critical thought to reason out problems.
I don't think it's like this big deal that, oh, now we have all these things that just work, and we don't know how they work. And that's why we have a problem. I mean, I really very much don't think that that's in play here.
Problems with them because they're just better at solving the problems themselves, or in some cases you just get a new computer. It's called planned obsolescence. Very cute. And so anyway, I think this is happening also with math. And every other form of critical thought is being outsourced to some sort of machine, to some sort of AI.
Yeah, it's not encouraged to think critically. It's not encouraged to get a hobby. It's not encouraged to do a letter exchange with somebody far away or whatever. Like, none of this is encouraged, right? I mean,
to some sort of thing that is external from yourself. So now the individual, the kid, doesn't have to actually think about how to solve what is multiplication, what is a fraction, what is division, etc., right? What is algebra? They don't have to understand the logical implications of algebra because they have a computer that will do that for them.
Just because I learned one day how to do divisions with the long formula and why it makes sense, I don't think I'm any more of a logical thinker than anything at all. Come on. It really is about me applying myself to something where I care. And yeah, a lot of trial and error.
And I think the problem with that is that once you abstract so many avenues of critical thought, you, at a certain point, abstract critical thought itself. And the worst...
No, I'm thinking critical thought is actually quite a high achievement.
part about this is that it doesn't end in school. I think this has happened all across the entire culture, and every single group of people.
Yeah, everyone is extremely smart in a narrow silo, so to speak, in a narrow part of something.
And this is going to ruffle a few feathers.
And yeah, that's gonna ruffle a few feathers, because I think that's quite intentional, because there's a lot of money to be made when things keep going as they are. No innovation allowed.
Here, and that's why I'm doing it. But there are a lot of things that, in my opinion, if you evaluate these things critically, you can easily see how they don't really make a lot of sense, and how there is a common conclusion that any normal, reasonable person would come to. I'll give you 2 examples, and we can maybe do 2 more examples. The first example is going to be the really easy one. This is the one that a lot of people can.
So where does he want to take it now? Now I'm curious. I do think there's a lot of money making going on.
Probably agree on. Have you ever seen the graphs or like the charts? This is for the America people here, that shows how many areas are red versus how many areas are blue, and they show, oh, well, look how many more red areas for Republicans versus Democrats. Why is it that, the races are so close? Well, it's because a mountain doesn't really have a lot of people living on it as much as the same way a city does, for example. Yeah. And so it's basically people that are willfully misunderstanding data. But the problem here is that I think that
I'm not even sure that's what people do. I haven't seen this argument before.
Had such a long time period of willful misunderstanding that people have stopped acting. And here's another one.
I'll also say, between the 2 big parties, it makes a whole lot of sense that you get a system where one party is right happy to win elections playing to a small group of people, and the other party is right happy to have the other party, the one party, stay out of its turf. So they can do whatever in terms of what you gotta do to get ahead in a big city, what kind of delusions you gotta adopt, and so on. And the other party doesn't care, because they don't need your vote. So you only have this one party that runs the show, because it's connected with every business and whatever interests. It's an arrangement that works for both parties.
Climate change. This is a really big one. Now, the big concept with climate change is not whether or not it's happening, it's whether people are causing it or not. Let's use a little bit of logic here.
I'm not even sure that's the big question, because one way or another, I think the big question is, how do you address it? And there's a world of options there, and some are more hostile to the existing ways people are making money, and some are less hostile, right? Like, I don't actually care how much or how little climate change is being caused by humans. It's not a question I ask myself anymore. Like, how do we work with what we got? And hey, maybe we end up in a situation where we reduce CO2 too much, and then we need a process to be able to correct for that as well, right? Like, we need to have a process that works, that isn't so taken over by profit interests.
If you light a cigarette in a room, the room will smell like a cigarette. If you light a bunch of cigarettes in a house, the house will smell like cigarettes. If you have a lot of pollution in the city will have a lot of pollution in it, and it will be unsafe to breathe in. There are a lot of places, I think there's a few places
everyone
like
agrees
that
on that
used to be
for
like
one.
that in China, for example. So in a theoretical world, it would be very...
Although China with the electrical cars, they've really fixed all of that, I heard, so good for them.
Logical that if you...
Also do note, when the wind blows like it blows because the earth rotates, it blows from the west to the east, and so, sometimes the smog from China ends up in the US. Think about it. So it's good they fixed that in China, right?
You caused enough pollution that you could negatively affect the earth in a bad way. This is somehow a bridge too far for many people, and many people are unwilling.
Actually, I've never heard the argument that that's not true. I've never heard of that, personally, but maybe I just don't hear the people who talk about pollution like it's a good thing. I don't know, what? People cheer for RFK Jr. when he's talking about that problem. Like, what? Anyway.
Willing to even come to the conversation of thinking about whether this is happening or not.
And by the way, of course, there are voices that say that probably, and they probably get boosted because it makes you think like, oh, people are so crazy. It's just, I really haven't come across this line of argument in any serious fashion at all, if at all, actually. Like, who says pollution is good? What? What?
And I think the reason why is because that type of critical thought puts them at odds with the ideology that they subscribe to. And this is something that, again, religion, we used to outsource this over to religion, but because people don't believe in that as much anymore, now we've decided to invent our own new forms of bullshit that, as I said before, are much less exciting than Jonah living in a fish, just to be honest. And so here's another one. Transgenders. Oh, this one's going to get people. Obviously, a transgender, male to female is going to have a biological advantage against a biological female. All other things.
People who disagree with Asmongold here, quite a number of them, they got hired because they live in some sort of delusional state. Again, this takes a lot of intelligence to check out in your mind. So these people, of course, you pay them so they can distract people from other questions, like how about economic development? How is that going in the West? And isn't it kind of important to have industry, maybe, because it just adds cost if you don't have industry, actually.
Considered equal. Any reasonable person knows this, and you can easily see this too, that there are very few biological females to males that then go on to compete in sports at a professional or very high level. I'm sure it's happened once or twice, but I don't think exceptions prove rules. So the point is that all of these...
I may grant even that this isn't even being done by people cynically. You just have people put up bags of money for people who then go with their delusion to study something to do with their delusion, and then it becomes a thing like Robin DiAngelo, DEI training, whatever, which is now apparently there's a study that points to it's really not helping. If anything, it's hurting the cause of minorities. So it's like, yes, somebody's putting out money there for this stuff that's totally not gonna rock the boat to get funded, and so you get a circle jerk out of that. Again, it takes intelligence, though. Like, not with intention, in a way. I feel like a lot of intentionality is just absent here. Like, the intentionality is we pay the people that are gonna be saying the things that make the company happy, the big company, and keep the government out.
These things are extrapolations of scientific reasoning and logical reasoning that, based off of which side of a different political spectrum you're on, you are not allowed to have these opinions. You are not allowed to think for yourself. And I think that's really what I'm getting at here, is that you are no longer allowed...
Like, you step out of line, you get slapped. It's not good. And of course, it's part of the whole thing, yeah.
To think for yourself, because thinking for yourself eventually takes you off of the, off of the reservation or off of the range that you are supposed to be living in.
Again, parties are not your friends. Just wanted to emphasize this here. It's not like this one team is worse than the other one. Like, yeah, sure, in a way, maybe for now, but again, it comes back to there's bags of money to be picked up. If you got crazy ideas that just so happen to say that the company is good, the big company, and the government stays out or supports the big company, and no oversight, no nothing.
Never want.
And where does the money come from? I feel like Team Red has some problems with that. Like, I don't really give that enough of a due as to where does the money actually come from and why. Like, is it just there? Did people just earn it? But like, if you want to buy a government bond, first the government has to give you money, actually. Where did that money come from? When you have central bankers be like, yeah, maybe it would be nice to have an efficient financial system that identifies worthwhile projects, implying that that's not what's happening, then,
to think for yourself, because you could accidentally make a mistake. You could think too far. You could commit a wrong think. And when somebody does this, they get completely excommunicated. I think a great example of this is J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling said, obviously, the female experience is something that only biological females can experience in this unique way.
She's trying to take away the punching ball, right? So that won't do. And so that's just step one, right? But it's a series of many steps leads you to then asking, okay, so what do we even do here? Who is this for? Who does what for who? And why?
Now, it doesn't mean trans women can't be women. It doesn't mean they shouldn't be treated like women. But the experience that trans women have is different than the experience that a biological woman has. This is a completely logical thing. I think that probably 90% of people think this, but people have to live with their mind in a cage and pretend like they don't. And
or they haven't thought about it yet. But they're on board with the LGBTQ plus thing, and that means we don't think about that. And if somebody asks questions, they're probably homophobes, right? So it's kind of like an open question to these people still.
I think happens is that as soon as a person sees what happened to, let's say, J.K. Rowling, where she gets completely excommunicated by her group of people, right? Because she used to be very, liberal.
And of course, there are the people who get on her payroll because they are so delusional that they're gonna really believe in something crazy. Right, again, but it takes intelligence.
Person, etc. She got totally excommunicated. Everybody hates her now. And she also, by the way, got way more radicalized to the other side. So it does have a negative effect too.
Yeah.
But most importantly, the point that I'm making here
It's not about whether you're pro or anti-trans now, is it?
Is the fact that when you think for yourself, when you let your own experiences dictate the way that you see the world, you oftentimes come into a direct contradiction with the ideologies that you are part of.
True.
And people don't like.
And, if you do fiscal austerity and the economy crashes, you come into a realization that stuff may be not so hot as well.
To think people don't like nuance, and I think this has always been true, right? I mean, we had Salem witch trials, they burnt Joan of Arc, Galileo was suppressed. I mean, we've always done this, but what's interesting nowadays is that it's done for a secular reason, and it's the interesting,
You want cheaper workers. You don't want the workers to be drugged up and incompetent. But collectively, it sure keeps the attention off of your business, so you have more leeway legally and whatnot. So you see, there's a collective, a collectivity to people wanting to make money that's at odds with people as individuals wanting to make money. And I haven't read him, but I keep hearing him pop up. Thomas Sowell. I think he used to be a Marxist, and then he started talking about individuals and bureaucracies or whatever. I think he's also going in the direction. Is maybe it's a good thing to want to make money as an individual, not so much as a collective with a bureaucracy behind you. Anyway.
Substantial application of critical thinking when it's something that you've already agreed with the conclusion on. And I think that's what's really happened. And so you have people that are growing up in school and they ask questions, because, a kid thinks why is this way? And, oh, wait a minute, you can't ask that, you can't ask these, you can't think about.
I mean, for my individuals do happen to most of the time have moral codes. And you really want to outsource the craziness to your bureaucracy, right? You can't actually make money if you are the crazy people that speak on your behalf. People who really believe that these women with a male type puberty, they really gotta do compete in those sports. But for women, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to be that person, but also wanting to make money. So, again, as individuals, maybe wanting to make money, not so bad, but when you start outsourcing roles, maybe then you get the crazies in. And so it's a complicated question as to what to do about that. I don't know either.
Like this, because this is the wrong way to think about it. And so now
I'm saying that also specifically because I don't buy into this Austrian economist nonsense, which monetarism is really just a spin on that. And we've had monetarism for a long-ass time across the globe. You see, the system works with the US being the net deficit spender of the world and everyone else being Austrian economists guided, in a way, monetarist guided, right?
Now you're stepping outside of that box that you're supposed to stay in. And I think this also dovetails very well into the way that cults work. Now, a lot of cults, there is a turning point, right? When you're going from, the under level to the upper level of the cult. And
yeah, I don't mind Asmongold explaining some of the more detailed methods of action for learned narcissism, cults, and so on. These things that are clearly in play, like cult-like tendencies as a matter of who gets paid because they say things and so on. It's like some details, sure.
This is the point where you are now given the arcane esoteric teachings of whatever madman decided to invent this cult. But before you do that,
they're in place because there's bags of money to be picked up, because it keeps the money coming in for big company.
You have to.
I mean, it can be a little complicated. Like sometimes the company drink the Kool-Aid itself, and then it's fucked. So, at least for a period of time.
Do some form of initiation that oftentimes requires you to forego your own logic, forego your own thinking, disregard reality, and accept their version of reality as your reality. And the reason for that is it's a degree of commitment. How committed to you are you to this cause in order for you to fully be part of our in-group? And I think that now people are performing that initiation ritual at a mass level. They are basically performing the initiation ritual themselves for society to see. Oh, wait a minute! This person is actually part of our team.
Yeah, and I'm again like look at the cities versus the Team Red and Team Blue. Team Red, they win by not going to the cities. Team Blue, they get the cities. What do you do if you don't drink the Kool-Aid in a city? It's maybe you want to run into all kinds of awkward or even career-ending situations. So, as a pure defensive mechanism, you would disabuse yourself of the notion of thinking about certain things potentially.
Becomes more important that you are following the line of thinking of like.
So it's not really just people doing it to themselves, you know.
You know, the group of people that you think
like individual doing it to itself. It's not really that.
That you're part of.
It's just decentralized the way it works.
It's more important that you follow their line of thinking than you follow your own line of thinking. And I think that that's what's really led to the decline of critical thought. And so you have machines nowadays that think for you. So you're not exercising that critical thought. You don't need to troubleshoot anymore because the machine does that for you. And then you also have society that's actively trying to suppress every form of critical thought that you can possibly fucking have. Like, there are a lot of things that many people can
now he said it, nice.
Always agree on, but because of political spin, it turns into being a controversial issue. I think things like lobbying or something like that, like gerrymandering, etc. But people contort themselves into doing gymnastics to justify them because these things are what is preferential or advantageous for their side. And I think that the more that you do that, the more that you practice not thinking for.
I mean, there really are revolving doors between party machines, and profitable industry positions and regulators. That really is a thing.
Yourself. You practice not actually applying your own thought, not trying to evaluate things based off of your own experiences. And the worst of all is the fact that it's not that you're not thinking, it's that you're letting somebody else do the thinking for you. And I think that's what people want, by the way. I think that there is a primal human desire to take all.
Probably true, but also overstates it.
Of your existential problems and then give them to somebody else, and then they're going to tell you all the answers. You don't have to think about this shit anymore because that's really complicated, and it's much easier just.
I mean, you don't forget about just how long people are being held up in school, more or less having to memorize stuff. I mean, I think it would do something to people. I would think that humans tens of thousands of years ago were walking 17,000 steps a day on average. All right, like that's. I think the mindset of exploring is also very powerful in humans. But hey, you were being made to sit around all day for well over a decade as a kid. That's gonna do something to you.
To watch football or play video games. So the fact is that that's why I think that we're losing a lot of critical thought. We don't have to use our brains anymore, and the times that we do are usually a mistake. And I think this is going to keep getting worse, by the way. It's going to keep getting.
I want to push back on this. We don't have to, we just don't have the opportunity to. And then we have reasons to just not go there.
Worse and worse and worse until it reaches a fever pitch where it's just a unrecognizable reality and people have to turn around. But I think that again, being able to, it's almost like it's kind of like it's I would say it's like virtue signaling, but
again, keep in mind, if you do too much thinking, then you're gonna start questions about the red team too. They're right happy to have the crazies in the blue cities as long as they get to win some elections here and there. In a way, they're like super complicit, aren't they?
It's like retard signaling in a way, where you're now you're going out and you're saying these things, and it's like, okay.
Although I wonder how conscious that is. Again, everything just keeps moving along. As long as everyone pursues their own individual self-interest in a way that goes against their own individual self-interest, actually.
This is the person who's saying that.
Because you can't tell me that this is the best we can do in terms of being a productive, joyful society, right? I mean, I think everyone should be able to see that this ain't it.
I don't want to give like a big list because it's going to trigger a lot of people in chat, but you're going into the NPC programming of certain people and you're saying the thing that you're supposed to say. And then once you do that, now you're part of a club. Now you can be accepted because you have decided to forego your own reality, forego your own critical thinking, and instead adopt the critical thinking and the reality of the group. And I think that that's why we don't have.
Again, I think the critical thinking is just it's a tall order unless you commit yourself in the first place. So, and specifically to things to do with ideas, with reasoning, with logic, with natural language, not just logic.
People that think for themselves. It's because they're afraid to. They're afraid to think for
that's also one thing.
Themselves, because if they do and they think too hard or they think too much in one direction, they could end up ruining their entire life. And
I would tell you don't worry about that too much, because as long as you understand that egalitarian principles, like you might find in the Bible or whatever, but also elsewhere, like that we're all worthy of moral consideration and in principle capable of critical thought if we just get into the right context. I think as long as you have that, I think you'll be fine, right? And I mean, it's intuitive. This is why liberalism can take such a beating without many champions for it. Because liberalism is, in some key ways, about, like, we all have a shot at this thing called human life, and do be part of the politics of your life. Like, not like some sort of party politics necessarily. Again, I don't really care which way you vote, if you vote at all, whatever, but being able to navigate for the betterment of your own life in a self-reflective way. I think we all can do that, right? I mean, at least in principle. And I think as long as you understand that, I think you'll be fine, actually.
And you see this happen. You see this happen with someone like J.K. Rowling. Not like she's ruined her whole life, but it's just a person who is asking a question.
And yes, sometimes you're gonna lean too much into something that's gonna be problematic, and then you can say sorry. And if society doesn't like it, it's actually a society problem. You know what I mean?
Who is trying.
And it is true that you might want to utilize this thing called anonymity on the internet. Yeah, I do it too. But in terms of the broad strokes, it's about that human equality on a base level.
To express their worldview, and they're completely hated by everybody. And I think that there are many such cases, and I'm curious, guys in chat, has there ever been an opinion that you think is just absolute common fucking sense, and then if you mention this opinion or you say this opinion, everybody hates you for it? And I think that the more of those that we discuss and we talk about, the more that we can get back to actually thinking as a form of coming to a conclusion rather than as a form of reverse engineering a conclusion.
I would say you probably just want to build resource capacity, etc., networks that are a bit less dependent on this or that established brand.
So it's like, instead of making up your mind on what's true and then trying to logically justify it, you should look at logic and try to, inductively decide what is actually the truth. And I would love to see things go back to that, but I think the first thing that you have to do is you have to acknowledge the things that are not that. And I think that we have so many of those nowadays in our...
And by the way, I'm all for the universal basic income and stuff, but I am saying if people are expected to do things, to build things, to maybe be politically like decision makers in key roles by whatever method, then if you have a commitment to people actually being required to be competent, then they will in fact more often than before be able to be competent, smart and wise, But of course, it can be selective. There can be always some selective oversights, which I wouldn't go to the individuals to shame them about it. It would be about like, okay, so what is the thing that's gonna make you money in the future? Like, what is the thing that that's gonna keep you in office in the future? Like, you gotta look at, okay, so how do you reproduce your status and so on, and then you can from there you can figure out maybe there's some problematic incentives as to where you wouldn't go with your thinking, where you would go with your thinking. That's the approach I would go with there.
Society. And again, people are afraid to step outside of that box because you can ruin your life for doing so. And you see many such examples on social media and on the news.
Being a bit more courageous, probably a good thing.
And I think that kids, again, are just getting farmed because they never have to critically think because machines do everything for them. And I think that's exactly what's happening. And things are just going to keep getting worse.
Other people and machines are definitely doing enough for now so that it seems that we don't need these people to be all that developed.
Until, number one, people can acknowledge.
And of course, I think that's a delusion in its own right. If there's bounty on the table that's not being picked up, it will come to haunt a society. So you let people, you ignore people's productive potential at your peril. And sure, again, I like the UBI. So we got this is just a part of negotiating. Okay, how much can you demand from people? But so I'm principally of the view that, yeah, you really want to extract stuff from people. You really want people to be productive and work hard and think both smart and in a wise way, yeah. But so the counterpoint to that is, okay, so but how much does the person actually do for themselves? Like, you can have a UBI there or something. I mean, just to get it is a nice idea. There's some benefits to it. Of course, then you gotta talk about like, oh, but like the rent, who pays the rent? Isn't the rent just gonna eat up all the UBI? Yeah, I mean, of course. But these are questions that will get resolved if people have an understanding of themselves as economic, political actors who are worthy of having some time for themselves and being of use to others.
Acknowledge it's a problem, and number two, it legitimately becomes a problem. And I think you're probably going to see that in workplace productivity going down maybe in the next 20 years or so. But by then we'll have everybody replaced by robots, so maybe it won't even matter. Either way, guys, that's what I think. So I'd be curious to hear, what is your example of something that is so critically obvious, but people try desperately to deny that it isn't true?
Yeah, like that machines take the jobs. I just disagree with that. Because I don't think there's so much stuff that humans can do for pay for each other as long as there's pay to be had from each other. Anyway. And also AI it's not very reason-based. It's not at all, actually. It's based on proximity within a sentence. It will get the truth values of stuff wrong reliably if it's talking about something that has a small amount of data to do with it. Like if I have a summary of a video, it will sometimes get the truth values of statements wrong. Like, oh, he did this. Oh, actually, he didn't. It's the opposite. The AI will tell you the wrong thing because it misheard. Because there's only one point of reference. And it's like some should or shouldn't got dropped in this one sentence. And from the whole video, it's clear that the person meant one thing, but the AI cannot reason that out. It just does proximity-based drawing by numbers sort of stuff. It's really just drawing by numbers, what AI does. I think that's a nice example, nice analogy. I'll use that more often. Anyway, so I'll look forward to what you have to say in the comments if you care to tell me something there. And yeah, leave Asmongold a like and a sub over at their place. I will link the vid below. Also over here, like and sub, it really helps, much appreciated. And last but not least, good health is number one, get ahead for yourself, but also people are anything between terrifying and terrific, but definitely not inherently stupid. Keep that in mind. Anyway, I hope you have a good one. Stay safe out there. Meow.